Welcome back to the Sportsnaut interview. And yes, you can hear it, right? The crack of the bat, the smell of the grass. Soon, you'll be able to go into a stadium and just feel and smell the hot dogs wafting through the concourse. I can't wait. It's baseball season, ladies and gentlemen. And when we want to talk baseball here at Sportsnaut, we have one of the best in the business right here in our own building. And that, of course, is Dan Connolly, who now joins us. Dan, baseball season's upon us. I, for one, am incredibly excited. It was an exciting offseason. When you look at everything that happened in the offseason, sort of what's your takeaway from what we saw during the winter, from the winter meetings through the free agency, all of that? Kind of what's your big headline?
My big headline right now is it's not over. We have spring starting. We have, as you said, pitchers and catchers have reported, and you have the Boris Big Five still out there. You have a guy who was the Cy Young Award winner last year who doesn't know which camp he's going to land in today, February 15th. That's the big story. Obviously, the big story for everybody is some guy in L.A. signed. I don't know if you've heard about him. He pitches. He hits a little bit.
A little bit.
But when Shohei Ohtani shows up at spring and people are counting his swings in batting practice, that has to be the big story, right? 10 of his 21 swings were home runs. I mean, I've seen a billion batting practices before, and I don't think I've ever counted a guy's swings. That tells you how important Shohei is to Major League Baseball, to the Los Angeles Dodgers, to everything. So Shohei, getting the largest contract in baseball history, going to the Dodgers, the crosstown rival, if you will, if you want to call that a rivalry, from the Angels. That's the big story. And then throw in Yamamoto as a guy, who was the big name outside of Ohtani, and he goes to L.A. too. So L.A. is, the Los Angeles Dodgers are the story, but where's Blake Snell going to land? Where's Jordan Montgomery going to land? Where's Cody Bellinger going to land? These are questions that we had in November, Scott, and here we are in February, and we're still asking them.
Well, Dan, why is that? Why have these guys not been able to come to some sort of agreement with the teams that are interested in them?
Well, I think it's strategy, honestly, especially when it comes to Snell and Montgomery's part. Scott Boras is the agent for all these guys, and he's very smart at what he does. He knows what he's doing, and he always likes to set the market. It's just what he has always done. And he wasn't setting this market with Ohtani on it, who he does not represent, and he wasn't setting it with Yamamoto on it, who does not represent. He waited for those guys to go, and those guys didn't go until January, right? Well, specifically, Yamamoto didn't go until January. So now you have it open. Now you have the dance becoming. And it's great for Boras and Boras' clients because, one, you have, a limited amount of teams that can actually pay, can be in that stratosphere, right? Of just a couple teams that really can pay that kind of money for Blake Snell. And you only eliminated one with two guys with the Dodgers. So you have all these suitors still out there. Blake Snell changes every single team in the majors. I mean, you throw Blake Snell on the Yankees, they're the AL East favorites. You throw Blake Snell on the Giants, suddenly, they've evened it up a little bit with the Dodgers. You throw him on the Mariners, they may be the best team in the AL West. And the same thing, throw him on the Phillies. He is one of the best pitchers in baseball. We saw it last year when he's healthy, and obviously you always have to state that. But he's a very, very good pitcher. He changes the complexity of pretty much any team he ends up with. And, they suddenly have an ace, or in the Yankees' case, they have two, or in, the Dodgers' case, they have 3 or 4. But, you look at that and you think when Snell goes, then maybe it's Montgomery. It just becomes dominoes. And because one guy has been in control of the dominoes, he's the one that's kind of putting the pace out. The one concern I have is I've seen this happen over the years. When pitchers specifically do not get into their routine early, it often affects them, in my opinion anyway, at least the first month or two of the season, because they are creatures of habit. They know when they need to start building up their bullpens. They know when they need to start, escalating the innings pitched, that kind of stuff to get themselves ready. They've been doing this for years. A guy like Snell is a creature of habit, like Montgomery. So it should happen soon, I would think, because people say that Scott Boras does this for himself, but he takes care of his clients.
Take care of those guys.
Yeah, and I don't think he wants them to spend too long, when spring training is going.
Yeah, and pitching. I mean, pitching for those that are casual baseball, pitching in Major League Baseball is such a complex thing. The mechanics, all those things involved. To your point about creatures of habit, they have to be right to be at their peak performance. They have to get into that rhythm so that by the time they hit the season, they get to that first week of the season, they're as ready as they can be. It's going to be fascinating. And you mentioned, of course, the Dodgers. Everybody's watching the Dodgers. Massively high expectations. But when you look at the other teams around the league, is there another team that excites you based on what they did in the offseason?
All right, I don't want to sound like a homer here because I've covered the Baltimore Orioles for 25 years.
Right.
And a month ago, I would not have said this. Mm-hmm. But and today I actually have to step back a little bit too because news has come out of Sarasota that may hamper what the situation is going to be. But the Baltimore Orioles going out and get Corbin Burnes,
huge,
not giving up anybody who they were necessarily really counting on for 2024. Two guys who are good prospects, good kids and good players in DL Hall and Joey Ortiz, but not guys that they were counting on. That is huge. That is a game changer. That's like signing a Blake Snell, bringing in a Corbin Burnes for 1 year. So for me, the Orioles, who won 101 games last year, they filled their two biggest holes. They lost Felix Bautista to an elbow injury. They bring in Craig Kimbrell. Kimbrell's not Bautista, but he still is a guy who has experience, in the back end and can help some of those other younger guys in the back end that, guys like Cano who have some experience now. And then you throw in Burnes to be the number one, and suddenly that's a really good rotation. Now, I'm going to preface that with what we just learned today, that Kyle Bradish has a UCL sprain. And he was supposed to be their number one guy before they got Burnes. He was tremendous last year. He is going to start the season on, on the injured list. And that's a blow to them. Also, John Means may not be ready. We were all counting on him being, the third or fourth guy after he had elbow surgery a year and a half ago. He may not be ready for opening day as well. So that's a pretty big blow. You got a rotation that looked really good. And now suddenly, you lose the two and maybe the 3 or 4. So like you said, there's so many different dynamics in pitching, and so many things have to happen. So to me, getting Burnes is a big deal. I also really, Scott, like what the Arizona Diamondbacks did.
Yes.
Specifically, what I like, Eduardo Rodriguez, you're paying him 4 years, $80 million. He's not making 120 starts for them. He is going to have 20, 30 starts where he's not going to pitch. That is his history. However, you put him in now, in with that rotation, which was the one thing that really kind of held them back as they went to the World Series. Yeah. You give them a guy who's a clear 3 or a clear 2, like Eduardo is, and suddenly that team is so much better. And so I really like what they did there, and I like that they started playing with the big boys this year. Yes. They, the 4-year, $80 million deal for a guy who has injury history is one of those things that a Yankees can do, or Red Sox, Dodgers do, right? Because they're paying basically for 2 or 3 years and not all 4 years because they know he's not going to be healthy throughout that 4, right?
Yeah.
That's the move that a big market team makes, and that's what the Diamondbacks did, and I love that for them.
Yeah, and it's interesting. They're a team they don't get as much love as they should. I agree with you on that one. I go to the NL Central now, and there's 2 teams there that I think are ready to get over the hump. The St. Louis Cardinals, obviously, and then the Cincinnati Reds. Talk about those 2 teams. I think the Cardinals will maybe a little bit ahead of the Reds. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think the Reds are in a position now, too, with all that young talent where they get late in the season. If they're where they were last year on the cusp of the playoffs, they could probably make a trade this year and go out and get a veteran to push them over the top. What do you think of that NL Central in those 2 teams?
I like it. I want to hold judgment till we know where Cody Bellinger is going to be, right? Because
Yeah.
if Cody Bellinger joins the Cubs, and the Cubs have gone out and made a couple moves, then you're talking about maybe a 3-team race. Yeah. I am a little reticent to talk about the St. Louis Cardinals because it seems like every year I say the St. Louis Cardinals should be the best team in that division. Every year the St. Louis Cardinals should be toward the World Series. And last year they were terrible. They were one of the biggest disappointments, if not the biggest disappointment in baseball last year. So they go out, and instead of making huge moves, they make small, smart moves. Not that Sonny Gray could be considered a small move, but he's not a headliner the way some of these other guys like a Snell would be. Love Sonny Gray, love what he does, love the kind of pitcher he is. So I think that's a huge, really a big step for them. For me, I look at the Reds and I think this team's ready to pop. Mm-hmm. I do believe that this team not only could be good now, they went ahead. One of the things I thought was curious is what they would do with Jonathan India. Because it kind of looked as if they were pushing him out of the infield there. Where was he going to end up? You know, they had such young guys. But this is a guy who was a couple years ago was Rookie of the Year, is very talented. And he was heading towards arbitration. Sometimes that can be a sticky situation. Well, they give him 2 years. And they basically make the statement that, hey, we're not going to worry about money. We're not going to worry about your arbitration next year, whatever. You're our guy. You're going to be our team leader. Votto's not going to be around anymore. And we want to show that to you. And we gave you a 2-year deal. And I love that. Because I do think he is an important piece there. I think he's a guy who can really take a team on his back. And he doesn't have to now. When you look at some of those young guys that they have, I mean, they are stocked, especially with position players. Yeah. So really like that. One under-the-radar move I'm going to mention to you that does change it for me a little bit. I spent a year around Kyle Gibson. And there are very few players in my career that I have watched that has the kind of impact he has on a team and on a rotation. He came into a very young rotation with the Orioles, and he won a lot of games for him. He was a very average pitcher. But what he did was he got the guys on the same page. He was always there to talk to them if they needed anything. He was just a tremendous leader. You put him with Sonny Gray, and you got a couple guys who really like doing that and are good at that. And Kyle is just, he's one of the top humans in baseball. He really is. And, I mean, the stuff he does if he doesn't win at some point the Clemente Award, I'll be surprised because of all the stuff that he does.
Off the field.
He's just such a good dude. And so putting him in there, he can probably have a 4.5 ERA for the Cardinals next year. But what he can bring to that team, I think, is really important. And they have other leaders on that team. I mean, they have Goldschmidt, they have other guys. Mm-hmm. So I do like what the Cardinals did, but we're not gonna count the Cubs out yet, because if they put Bellinger back in there and they made some of the moves they made, I like them too. And the Brewers, we thought the Brewers were going to try. They won by 9 games last year, and now they don't have Woodruff or Burns, and so I think there's a major step backwards. And there's another team in there in Pittsburgh. God bless them. We'll see.
Yeah. And Pittsburgh's such a great baseball town, and they just those poor fans just can't get any satisfaction. They can't get any fun, and just a playoff hype for them would be amazing for that great city, that great stadium. It's one of my favorite stadiums in all of Major League Baseball. Dan, before we let you go, a couple of questions. Who should we get into spring training this week? And of course, pitchers and catchers, and then next week we got everybody rolling in. When you look at young players around the league, who's the one young player that people should watch for in spring training that you think will be buzzworthy for baseball heads like me?
I'm going Homer again, and I don't mean to do this. It's not what I'm trying to do, okay?
I understand.
The Orioles is purely an incidental thing. We would never have these conversations years ago, but you got me now in 2024. It's got to be Jackson Holliday. I mean, he is the top prospect in baseball. Mm-hmm. Mike Elias has said that he is going to compete for a job. Obviously, they don't want him playing 30% in the majors. I mean, he is going to be playing 100% or 90% somewhere, whether it's at AAA, where he ended the season last year at 20 years of age, or it's, with the majors, probably playing second, maybe some shortstop. This kid is a very special talent. Watched him last year in spring training for the first time and was just blown away about how good he was at everything. I mean, the ball jumps off his bat, like line drives everywhere. The power will be developed, obviously, as he gets bigger, as he gets stronger. He looks like he's about 13, but he plays like he's about 27. Yeah. And he is really fun to watch. He is going to be one of the best young players in baseball in 2024. I guarantee that. The question is whether it starts in April or late March anyway in this case, or, whether we'll see it in June or July. But he is really good, and I think he is, the other Jackson from Milwaukee, sure is a guy that you have to look at as well. There are other players, but I've seen Holliday. I know the kid's attitude. I know what he can bring. And if he gets the opportunity and doesn't get over himself too much and just kind of is steady, which he seems to be, he is going to be a guy we're going to talk about all through 2024.
Oh, I can't wait for it. And we're going to be talking more with Dan throughout the season. We're going to do a lot more baseball this year. I'm excited about that. And make sure you check out Dan's work up on sportsnaut.com. And do us a favor, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube page here. Also like that video, hit on that notifications bell. That way, anytime we have a video with Dan and his massive amounts of baseball knowledge out of that massive sized brain inside his head there. That is, by the way, if you X-ray, if you X-ray Dan's head inside the brain, it looks like a baseball, right? It's got the laces, it's got everything. That's how much baseball's on his mind. But Dan, we always appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
You guys got to take care.